Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining. It's now 3 p.m. and we are very happy to begin this third webinar of the series organized by the European Milk Bank Association, EMBA, with the support of Medela. This third webinar will focus on new challenges for human milk and human milk banks, emergencies and disasters. Before we begin, I invite Natasha Jalou, Director of Medical Affairs Europe, for a welcome note.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Natasha Jalou, and I am responsible for Medical Affairs Europe at Medela. And as Bibi said, we are very happy to welcome you to the third EMBA webinar this year, which we are delighted to support. Thank you for being here today. At Medela, we are focused on turning science into care. It means that by supporting research in human milk and lactation, observing natural behavior of mothers and infants, and in listening to our customers, we want to support you, their healthcare professionals, with appropriate products and services like education, like we have today. With this webinar today, we want to support you improving the nutrition with human milk in Europe. Before I give the word to the new EMBA president, Professor Sertaç Aslanoglu, I would like to explain a few housekeeping rules. So at the end of the session, you have the possibility of writing your question into the box for questions. And Professor Sertaç Aslanoglu will pick up the questions and the speakers will be able to answer you. And if we don't have time to answer all of them, we will do our best to answer the questions by email after the webinar. We have also a download area where you can download the certificate at the end of the webinar. And last but not least, we want to improve the next webinars in the future. So please stay in line online after the webinar to answer a very short survey to know about your satisfaction and what we can improve. I wish you a very interesting webinar and give over the word to Professor Sertaç Aslanoglu. Thank you.
Professor Sertaç.
Good afternoon, all the participants, dear colleagues. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the third webinar of the series organized by Human Milk Milk Bank Association, and we thank for their support to Medela. In this webinar, we have three distinguished speakers who will talk on different but very interrelated subjects. We will have the questions at the end of the webinar. And I would like to say a few words also. Why did we select this topic? New challenges for human milk and human milk banks, emergencies and disasters. As you know, preterm birth is a nutritional emergency, and the infant's oral feeding development has a long journey in the neonatal intensive care unit. So a team is working on this, and in this long journey, we also in this challenging time, the mother's early lactation needs to be supported and protected. Of course, donor human milk is not mother's own milk, but it can be considered and it is recommended until as a bridge until the infant receives completely mother's own milk. It's in the recommendations. Also, in this pandemic session, we have seen the importance of mother's own milk, and when there is no mother's own milk, the importance of donor milk supplementation or provision. And the third topic, which is very important, is to track human milk, because when mother's own milk is being promoted, we need some measures to decide if our efforts are changing some things in the positive way. So we now have we need evidence-based practice, and I would like to introduce you our first speaker now. She will speak about the early intervention to support human milk feeding in the NICU, a quality improvement initiative. Dr. Daniela Mook. I will read her CV. She is scientific manager at Medela Europe since 4 years. Before joining Medela, she was study coordinator and researcher at Technical University Munich and Helmholtz Center Munich, with over 10 years of experience in clinical trials in breastfeeding. Her areas of research interest include the importance of effective lactation initiation in high-risk populations and proactive management of lactation care of mothers. Dr. Mook has published her work in several peer-reviewed journals. Also, she is a speaker at national and international conferences. So the screen is yours, Dr. Mook.
Thank you, Professor Aslanoglu, for this very kind introduction. And also thank you, Amber, for the opportunity to talk to you today. So, as you may know, Medela is a research-based company. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Daniel.
Here you go, yeah. As you may know, Medela is a research-based company, and we are supporting human milk and breastfeeding research. And we do this by fostering long-term partnerships. For example, we recently celebrated 30 years of anniversary together with Professor Donna Geddes from the University of Western Australia. And we also look back at 2 decades of partnership with Rush University Medical Center in Chicago and Professor Paula Meyer. And I'm really passionate about sharing this research and working with healthcare professionals to improve the availability of own mother's milk in the NICU and improve breastfeeding rates in preterm infants. So these are my disclosures. I hereby declare that I'm an employee at Medela and have a material conflict of interest, of course, because Medela pays my bills. However, Medela is really delighted to be a co-sponsor and co-organizer of this event today. So my talk obviously will offer early intervention strategies to support human milk feeding on the NICU. And this first and foremost begins with active management of lactation care in the NICU mothers. So this is the outline of my talk. First, we will ask the question, do we actually currently capture the relevant data? Data which research says is really important to support own mother's milk feeding on the NICU and finally breastfeeding of preterm infants. With this, I'm going to give you an overview of our quality improvement initiative and what we have available to support you. The goal, as I said, of this quality improvement initiative is to support breastfeeding rates in preterm infants. And we really want to empower the hospitals here that they could actively support lactation care in NICU's mothers. However, in order to embark on any quality improvement initiative, it is important to know where you're starting from. So are we currently capturing the relevant data which gives us strong indication of a NICU mother's chance of long-term own mother's milk feeding and breastfeeding? And I would like to challenge your thinking on this point today. I think we are quite good in recording and benchmarking initiation of direct breastfeeding of term infants and feeding at discharge from hospital. But what about all the important markers in between delivery and discharge from hospital, and those with more relevance to pump-dependent mothers in the NICU, with a baby in the NICU? And we like to talk about human milk as a medicine. However, no other medicine is tracked as poorly as human milk. For instance, do we have the necessary data to review in order to undertake quality improvement? So, for example, do we record the time when a mother first expresses? Is this actually documented in the notes? Is it documented as routine, sometimes, or never? And do you, as a unit, know the percentage of NICU mothers who start expressing early, within the first 3 hours after birth? Is mother's milk production then tracked to ensure her milk is coming in timely? So do you know the percent of NICU mothers who reach secretory activation within the first 72 hours after birth? And do we go then on to track if milk volumes go up, and as milk volumes come in, so achieving at least 500 milliliter by day 14? So let's look at these 3 indicators in more detail. So firstly, why is time to first expression important? It's important because the first hours after delivery are really a critical time for programming the breast tissue, for priming it. So that means that we need to switch on secretory activation and kick off the lactocytes to start their work. It is said in research that mothers who start expression within the first 3 hours after birth are more likely to be pumping at 6 weeks and when the infant is discharged home. However, without appropriate support, mothers of preterm infants are at high risk for delayed secretory activation, so milk coming in delayed, which means lower milk volumes and suboptimal milk production in the long term. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, this critical window to get things right has even become more important, especially with moms being discharged sooner and parent access to the NICU and also to pump equipment disrupted. So getting pumping off to the best start is really of critical importance for mothers with a baby in the NICU. And there needs to be the sense of urgency around this and a mindset that lactation care has really to be actively managed, because a wait and see approach will compromise our goal to discharge mother and her infant breastfed. Why is the time to milk coming in important? This is really a key to a successful lactation start. So usually secretory activation or milk coming in occurs between 24 and 72 hours after birth. However, milk coming in after 72 hours postpartum is considered delayed. And why is this important? Milk coming in after 72 hours has been consistently associated with negative breastfeeding outcomes in the scientific literature. In the short term, these include excessive neonatal weight loss, suboptimal breastfeeding behavior at day 7, and an increased formula use. And in the long term, these include a higher risk for shorter breastfeeding duration. So mothers with delayed secretory activation have a 60% higher odds of stopping breastfeeding at only 4 weeks. So this is why timely intervention to avoid a delay in secretory activation is key. And then monitoring coming to volume. Why is this important? Coming to volume indicates that the milk supply is on track to meet the infant's long-term needs. So when we talk about coming to volume, this is defined by expressing more than 500 milliliters per day. And this milestone should be achieved by day 14. It is actually the strongest predictor of feeding milk of the own mother at NICU discharge. It actually gives her almost 10 times greater odds of feeding milk of the own mother at NICU discharge. And this is really a fantastic piece of work from Rebecca Hoban and Professor Paula Meyer. So coming to volume is really important. And this is because the first 14 days after birth are a critical window to initiate and build milk supply. This is the time where the lactocytes, so the milk-making cells, are still very susceptible to the stimulation. But if you look at later points, it can be really so difficult and so frustrating for moms with a mother of a preterm infant to increase her milk supply significantly. Therefore, also, for example, Professor Diane Spatz highly suggests to focus and bundle your staff resources within these first 14 days and support lactation care, because this is where you can make an impact, and this is where we have to get things right. So how could Medela now support you? So we could support you with the help of a lactation quality improvement approach. As I said, together with leading experts, we have created quite simple but effective resources that NICUs or other departments that want to support lactation care can use. For example, to assess the human milk practices they have in place. They are able to collect data. You can identify the potential for improvement and implement evidence-based practices. You can choose from a bundle of interventions, as shown here, to improve in the results on maternal as well as on infant side, as shown here. So, for example, early intervention could be that your unit introduces the best practice of informed decision-making that would ensure that all parents receive timely information about how to establish and build a good milk supply and how to breastfeed a preterm infant. Would also navigate the parents around the value and the science of own mother's milk. Or you can introduce the best practice of early expression within the first 3 hours of frequent expression. And it can be that you're already doing well with early expression in the hospital, but you may see there's room for improvement to improve further practices and standardize your clinical practice around frequent expression or informed decision. So in the end, you could see improvements in all of the 3 results that ultimately lead to higher doses of own mother's milk for the preterm infant and higher breastfeeding rates in this vulnerable population. And as part of our quality improvement toolkit, we have developed various best practice resources, and they can all be accessed on our newly launched NICU Lactation QI Medela website, where you can find the link here. We have created, for example, awareness videos. These are at different levels. One is for the directors, another for the NICU staff, and the third one is addressed to the parents. However, the real heart of the initiative is our so-called NICU scorecard. You can also find it today in the download section of the GoToWebinar platform. And we have this as a printout and as an interactive scorecard. And this was developed together with Professor Paula Meyer and Professor Diane Spatz, both located in US. And this is really a fantastic tool because it allows your team and your NICU to self-assess your lactation care practices on the NICU. It stresses out 10 indicators, 5 for the mother, 5 for the infant, which are relevant to lactation care and breastfeeding. And usually when you look at this NICU scorecard, this gives us a great discussion point and starting point for initial evaluation. Because this tool will for sure highlight where your strengths are in clinical practice, but it will also show where the gaps are and where there's room for improvement. The NICU scorecard is complemented by 10 educational one-pagers. They provide little summaries to each of the indicators, and it comes along with educational PowerPoints that are usually held by our educators, if you wish to, in kind of a train-the-trainer concept for your NICU staff. And we've also developed a data collection tool. However, as sometimes pictures say more than words, I would like to show you one of our awareness videos, and this one is on department level.
Own Mother's Milk has the power to save lives and improve outcomes for our most vulnerable infants. So much of milk's life-changing potential is lost if mothers are not given the additional guidance and lactation care they need in the first hours and days after birth. There needs to be a sense of urgency around this. Adopting evidence-based lactation best practices during the first 14 days is critical to significantly improve long-term milk supply. Early, frequent, and effective expression is key. Maternal milk volumes need to be monitored to track performance of clinical practice. Research has shown that mothers achieving daily volumes of at least 500 ml before day 14 have significantly higher breastfeeding rates at discharge. Is this something you are tracking in your NICU? Medella's NICU Toolkit can help you act now. Talk to your Medella representative about our resources and start taking full advantage of the value of Own Mother's Milk today.
Dear Dani, can you turn your microphone on, please?
Apologies, I was talking. So this slide gives you an example of the reports that can be pulled off easily if you decide to use the data collection tool we developed. So hospitals that decide to embark on quality improvement can use this web-based tool. Then they would own the data, so Medella has no access to the data at all. And the hospital is able to record data around expression, milk volumes, skin-to-skin contact, infant feeding, and oral therapy. and it easily allows you to input and track your process. These are all examples of baseline starting data, and gives you a taste of reports that can be pulled off from the program. And using the data collection tool will help you to measure this by way of a multi-patient summary for clear analysis all in one place. So you would see your 10, 15, 20 patients or more you entered in a performance overview. And this is really for clear analysis and all in one place. So we very much offer our QI toolkit as combined approach or a joint approach. We are there to support you with evidence-based education materials, but it's very much the unit that drives the QI process. And we just act as facilitators or consultants. So we would provide you with a data collection tool and also give you the NICU scorecard. Then you as a unit would collate your baseline data and collect the data. Then we would together have a look at these baseline data and discuss potential gaps in your clinical practice and agree on your goals and relevant interventions to achieve this. Then a Medela educator could help practice changed education modules if you wish, while you continue with data tracking and collection and implementing these best practices in your clinical work. And after a while together, we would again look at the data and compare these results to baseline. And then it's up to you if we adopt the practice, adapt it further to your needs, or even abandon it. So we very much see this as an ongoing initiative following a planned study cycle. There's no need to publish the results, but some hospitals and neonatologists, of course, decide to do so. And I would like to show you some beautiful results from the Saitama Medical Center in Japan. This is quite a big unit with 108 cots in the NICU and the special baby care unit, level 3. And their goal was really to improve the breastfeeding rates at 1 month after birth. And they had quite an ambitious goal in this NICU population. So the breastfeeding rate should be equal to the national breastfeeding rates of healthy full-term infants. So they looked at the scorecard and agreed together with an educator on several interventions. So informed decision, then ensuring that all parents receive information about how to establish a milk supply and the value of own mother's milk, and early, frequent, and effective stimulation, meaning pumping within the first 3 hours, 8 or more times in 24 hours with double pumping and correctly fitted shields. And they really had fantastic outcomes. They reduced the time to first expression from over 13 hours to 2 hours, and also increased the frequency of expression to 2 more pumping sessions per 24-hour period. And overall, they increased exclusive human milk feeding at 1 month post-birth from just 15% up to 47%. And this was in just 4 months. So with this slide, I would like to close my talk, and I'm having my presentation in front of all of these advocates for human milk feeding. And I really hope that with my talk today, you also have become advocates in lactation care, because own mother's milk really has the power to save lives and improve the outcomes for our most vulnerable infants. And so much of this life-changing potential is lost, and we lose so much if the mothers are not given the additional guidance and lactation care they need in these first hours and days after birth. So let's help us put human milk in the spotlight. Any questions? Please reach out. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this great presentation. We will take the questions at the end of the webinar, dear Daniela.
Thank you, Sertac.
Welcome. So our next speaker is a very well-known scientist, Professor Dr. Guido Moro. Let me introduce him. He is in his long and impressive career. Guido Moro was a professor of neonatology at the Postgraduate School of Pediatrics in the University of Milan. He was also director of the Center for Infant Nutrition to Prevent Illnesses in Adult Life and director of the Department of Neonatology in Macedonia Meloni Hospital, with whom I had pleasure to work 10 years in these centers. In Milan, we are still in collaboration. So in Milan until December 2010, he was the head of the Department of Neonatology. From October 2010 to October 2012, he was the first president of European Milk Bank Association, and currently he is the president of Italian Association of Milk Banks. His main field of research is infant nutrition, with particular emphasis on low birth weight infants, human milk, and human milk banks. He has published more than 250 scientific papers and is a regular speaker in international meetings and conferences. I'm very happy that we are collaborating with him in the context of EMBA and Italian Milk Bank Association. He will speak about human milk banking in emergency situations. So the floor is yours, dear Guido.
Thank you, Sertac, for your nice words, and welcome to everybody to this webinar. I will try to start my presentation. Okay, so you can see here the map of human milk banks in Europe during 2022. At the moment, there are 281 active milk banks and 18 are planned for a future opening. As you can see, Italy has the highest number of human milk banks. And this is, as you know, probably that EMBA has been founded, this European Milk Bank Association has been founded in the year 2010. And the main objectives of this association are promotion of breastfeeding, utilization of human milk for preterm infants, and after international cooperation, European guidelines and scientific research. But a new challenge came out in the last years, and it is utilization of human milk banks network during emergency and disasters. So here I am showing you what is the definition of the term disaster. Disaster is defined as a calamitous event that leads to loss of lives, great human suffering and distress, and large-scale material damage. And when we talk about causes of disasters, we have to separate into in natural causes that are earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, droughts, epidemics, or human-caused like wars, migration, and nuclear disasters. Today I will speak about, briefly discuss about the 3 specific events that are considered serious emergencies: war, pandemic, and earthquake. War. On February 24, the Russian army invaded Ukraine and the war began. And as you know, a war affects and damages the whole population of a nation, but the most affected people are infants and children. So since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, 826 medical facilities were damaged, more than 130 have been completely destroyed. And at the end of October, 1,250 children casualties were registered in Ukraine. 430 died, and more than 820 were injured at various degrees of severity. But fortunately, the life goes on, and in Ukraine during the war, 63,000 newborns are born. In cities where air alarms or air strikes are taking place, hospitals are forced to use basements to protect the mothers with newborns. In such a situation, infants are breastfed in basements. In the emergency of the military conflict in Ukraine, mothers do all their efforts to start or continue breastfeeding. Breast milk is the only available food when the mothers are in bomb shelters or basements. When escaping from shelters or when moving to safe places under conditions where there are no water and electricity, breast milk is always clean, warm, safe, and nutritionally suitable. People living in Ukraine are not left alone because there have been, and there are still now, many human milk banks and many helps. But there is also a human milk bank in Kiev, that is the first human milk bank in Ukraine that was established in Kiev Perinatal Center in the year 2019. In the difficult condition of wartime, all the staff and the equipment of the perinatal center are working regularly. Milk received from a small number of donors is used for newborns in the NICU, for premature infants in the perinatal center, and other maternity hospitals in Kiev. At the same time, the mothers receive support for initiation of lactation. In the left part of the slide, you can see this poster where are the pictures of all the newborns that are born in the perinatal center during the war. But humanitarian aid is provided to Ukrainian people. Humanitarian aid is provided to women and children affected by the war. It is provided by Ukrainian and international charities around the world, and also volunteers play an important role in the organization of humanitarian aid. Maternity and children hospitals receive breast milk substitutes and medical nutrition for non-breastfed infants. Preference is given to the supply of liquid formula in places of active hostilities. The problem is the lack of proper control over adhesion to the code of marketing of breast milk substitutes. So the lesson from war in Ukraine. During wars, ensuring that infants are exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months and breastfeeding is continued for 2 years or more is crucial in reducing death and illnesses of infants. The risk of feeding infants something other than breast milk, particularly for the first 6 months, are increased because of dirty water, crowded and unhygienic living conditions, and huge supply of formula. This can lead to increased illnesses, malnutrition, and mortality. And now we turn to the second topic, that is COVID-19 pandemic. The effects of COVID pandemic on human milk banking has been negative. COVID-19 has exerted a high negative impact on human milk donation and activity of human milk banks all over the world. But there has been also a violation of WHO code during COVID-19 pandemic. The US $70 billion infant formula industry has been actively exploiting concerns about COVID-19 to increase sales in violation of the WHO Code, International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes, the code. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many companies have donated milk powder and other food to communities in Canada, India, Italy, Pakistan, the Philippines, and the UK violating both national laws and the WHO code. Improved implementation and enforcement of the WHO code in every country is urgently required, with severe sanctions for any violations. Here there are some examples of the effect of COVID-19 on human milk banks in the world. China, most human milk banks stopped donation during pandemic. Canada, slight decrease in donors, but able to offset this with the help of campaign via social media. US, supply of raw milk decreased, and the use of donor human milk has been prioritized to the most vulnerable. India, donor human milk supplies were deficient. Also, deliveries reduced by 35–40%. Italy, donation and volume of milk collected reduced significantly. There is only one exception, that are the Philippines. Philippines are living many emergency situations. They are living and they lived many of these situations. You can see here typhoons in 2009, typhoons in 2013, fires, volcano eruption, earthquake, and COVID-19 pandemic. But since 2018, the country has implemented a multi-sectorial initiative to increase the protection, promotion, and support of breastfeeding, also during emergency. Human milk banking is one of the most recent national strategies, supported by government and partners, recognized and recommended in national laws and policies. A total of 31 human milk banks are currently operating in the Philippines. More human milk banks have opened. The majority is in the capital area, but there are also human milk banks working in the center of Philippines and in the southern part of Philippines. So lessons learned during emergency situation: continue to protect, promote, and support breastfeeding by providing breastfeeding counseling to mothers. Other lesson: ensure readiness and preparedness of human milk banking during emergency. It is important to see that 10% of pasteurized donor human milk for each pasteurization is allotted for emergency, and this human milk, this pasteurized human milk, is distributed to distributed to the areas of emergency. It can be transported or by car or by helicopter or airplanes where the distance is very far. So the Philippines has developed a national policy related to human milk and emergency. They have passed key legislation on the protection, promotion, and support of breastfeeding and government policies aligned with the global strategy on infant and young child feeding. Human milk banks are established to protect, promote, and support breastfeeding. Legislation ensures the availability and mobilization of safe donor human milk during disaster or emergency to the affected areas. The third topic that I will cover today is the earthquakes. And I will talk about earthquakes in Europe in the period 2000–2017. As you can see here, Italy is the country with the highest number of earthquakes during this period. 12 episodes happened. Greece is the second country, and the other at the same level, very far from the number of Italy and Greece. So among a natural disaster, earthquakes represent one of the most lethal in terms of human and economic losses. Between 2000 and 2017, 34 earthquakes occurred in Europe. These natural disasters affected 257 people, 71 died, and 701 died, and caused economic damages for over 32 billion euros. So here you can see the number of reported earthquakes in Italy in the period 2002–2016. Italy has suffered the greatest losses. Between 2002 and 2016, 4 severe seismic events occurred, producing a total of 679 deaths and 124,000 injured people. And the most important, the most severe of this earthquake happened here in L'Aquila in the year 2009 with 309 deaths. Italy, due to its particular geodynamic context, is characterized by a high systemic hazard. You have to think that 37.6% of Italian municipalities fall in the two higher classes of earthquake hazard. Here you can see here, according to this color represents the very high risk of earthquake. The red represents a high risk, this is average and this is low. So as you can see along the Apennines mountains, this is a location for the very high risk of earthquake. Around this zone, there is the red area with high risk, and the high risk area is also here in the northeastern part of Italy, in Friuli, Venezia Giulia. So during earthquakes, in addition to the disaster-related urgent needs, safety, shelter, food and clean water, infants, young children, and pregnant women have specific needs that require an immediate and adequate response. So the situation in Italy. Italy is a country living in full hydrogeological disruption, which has turned from emergency to everyday reality. In the last decade, several emergencies occurred in Italy: earthquakes, floods, other disasters, refugee and migration crisis, and recently COVID-19. The civil protection and the emergency system at regional and local levels like SNPA, Red Cross, and non-governative organizations have significantly improved their response capacity, but little or nothing has changed in regards to protection, promotion, and support of infant feeding in emergency. You have to think that in emergency, the first intervention for infants and children is to bring them clothes, toys, and formulas. So Italy is not applying these guidelines that are listed here, the infant and young child feeding in emergency. If you look at this booklet, you can see that there is a priority actions to prepare for an emergency. There are 6 important steps. The first is endorse and develop policies. The second, train staff. Number 3, coordinate operation. Number 4, assess and monitor. And the last 2 points, number 5 and number 6, are directly related to infant feeding. So number 5 is protect, promote, and support optimal infant and young child feeding with integrated multi-sector intervention. And number 6, minimize the risk of artificial feeding. So infant feeding in emergency represents a priority. It is necessary to protect, promote, and support breastfeeding with early initiation of exclusive breastfeeding and limiting breast milk substitute as much as possible. If breastfeeding is not possible, other cultural appropriate strategies should be considered as relactation, wet nursing, and use of donor milk. An uncontrolled flood of infant formula should be avoided. When formula use is the only chance, it is important to preserve, if possible, the same brand of formula that the baby was receiving before the emergency. So infant feeding in emergency, it is a perennial challenge because displacement, stress, fear, and insecurity negatively impact infant feeding practices. There is lack of support and attention to infant and young children nutrition practices in emergency responses, and there is widespread donation of infant formula and canned bottled foods for infants during emergency, and it is not safe and does not meet the nutritional needs of infants and young children. So conclusion from all this story. In emergency, child deaths can be up to 70 times higher than the average rate. During emergency and disasters, infant survival can depend on their access to breastfeeding and/or human milk. Wet nursing and donor human milk a recognized option for feeding infants and young children in emergency situations, World Health Assembly. Relevant regulatory frameworks for donor human milk are fragmented and inconsistent, if not entirely absent. A new policy based on promotion and support of human milk strategy for emergency should be developed in every civilized country. So now I want to thank the Dr. Star from Philippines because she gave me some slides related to the Philippine situation. I want to thank here Valerie Pariznikova, that is the responsible of the Human Milk Bank Perinatal Center in Kiev, because she gave me the information about the situation in Ukraine, and Alexandra Veselovka for her great support to help the population of Ukraine during these terrible days. I want to thank also the Italian Association of Human Milk Banks for the information about earthquakes in Italy, the European Milk Bank Association, and Medela for the support of the organization of this workshop. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, dear Guido, for this excellent presentation. You opened our eyes to disasters and emergency situations, and we understand that an infant's survival in certain situations can depend on breastfeeding and the provision of human milk. So I conclude this part, and we have our third speaker now. Let me introduce him to you. He is Professor Miguel Sainz de Pipon. He's from Spain, a physician of the neonatology department of Hospital La Paz, also an associate professor of the Department of Pediatrics of the Autonomous University of Madrid, and coordinator of the pediatric nutrition course of the nutrition degree. We also know him very well because he is also coordinator of the gastroenterology, nutrition and metabolism section of European Society for Pediatric Research, and also member of the nutrition committee of ESPGHAN, and also a nutrition committee of the Spanish Society of Neonatology and Spanish Pediatric Associations. He is the author of more than 70 publications in high impact factor journals and principal investigator of several projects. So his topic is tracking of human milk feeding in the NICU, gaps in clinical practices and possible solutions. So the screen and the microphone are yours.
Well, Professor Arsanoglu, thank you very much for this very kind presentation. And it's for me an honor to participate actively in this webinar series, in particular this new challenge for human milk and human milk bank emergencies and disasters. Really, I thank Human Milk Bank Association, European Human Milk Bank Association, and I thank also Medela for the support in this seminar. The title of my talk, as it has been already stated, is Tracking of Human Milk Feeding in the NICU, Gaps in Clinical Practices and Possible Solutions. It is very difficult to give a talk after these two great speakers. The first speaker has set the basis of our talk, as we see later, and Professor Guido Moro is very well known for all, and he has given a splendid talk. So I will try to be as practical as possible and trying to really emphasize the need of tracking human milk feeding on top of what has been already presented in the first presentation. So what I would like to stress is that human milk, but especially own mother's milk, is the gold standard for newborns. And I am sure that all the people that you are listening to this webinar are really committed to this topic, to this goal, trying to get human milk, own mother's milk, on the top of our priority. But I would like to stress this very nice paper published in 2015. Really, mothers of very low birth weight infants maybe doesn't know prior to delivery what to do about feeding decision. And even more, they do not know which the goals are. And it has been published in this paper, but also ourselves, we have published also, and from Karolinska in Sweden, that production and consumption of human milk, of all mother's milk in particular, is decreasing all over the stay of the infants in our NICU. Even the mothers does not know previously which is the goal they have to assume, so it's very difficult for them to really try to fulfill the infant's needs. So, as I said previously, we need to protect breastfeeding and promote the use of human milk as an essential health intervention. So we should reinforce its status as a medical nutrient. Very low birth weight infants receiving human milk during the first 14-28 days of life have lower odds of developing sepsis, necrotizing enterocolitis, bronchopulmonary dysplasia, and retinopathy of prematurity. The mechanism is by decreasing intestinal permeability as it is induced by human milk. And what is most important for our talk is that the effect of human milk feeding is dose dependent. So it would be very important to track the real amounts. It has been already posted that the importance of knowing our data in base of percentage of intake, but we should go further and try to go to really the real intake, and we'll try to focus a little bit on this later on the talk. And these morbidities, neck, bronchopulmonary dysplasia, retinopathy of prematurity, sepsis, increase healthcare costs, prolong NICU hospitalization, and predispose the infant to long-term health and educational problems. So I thank Dr. Muke for this nice slide in which is very clear posted that global distribution of death among children under 5 is data from United Nations Children's Fund published in 2019, is data from 2018. You can see that most of the deaths in the first 5 years of life are related to prematurity, and that those deaths may be released or diminished by using on mother's milk feeding. So on mother's milk feeding saves vulnerable infant lives. So it's very important for us, as it was stated in the first talk, that when we are able to measure something, we are able to improve something. So if we are able to measure on mother's milk, we are going to improve on mother's milk feeding, and we are going to save lives and to decrease deaths related to prematurity. So mothers, as you know very well, mothers face many obstacles to provide milk. So there are still large variations in Europe in breast milk feeding at discharge of infants born very preterm, despite the known benefits of breast milk and breastfeeding. And really, we have to thank the Baby Friendly Hospital Initiative for Neonatal Wards, that this is NeoBF8I, like an adaptation of the WHO 10 Steps to Successful Breastfeeding, published already in 2009 for neonatal wards. So, as it has been already pointed out by the previous speaker, really the coordination to parental antepartum and post-delivery education through books and videos like the one that have been already presented in the first talk is really important to try to support mothers to face the obstacles to provide milk to their infants. It has been not already stated, but maybe hand extraction has advantage versus mechanical pumping to get as soon as possible breast milk supply to the infants. And also focus should be trained in interprofessional staff like physicians or nurses that may help the mothers that they do not think about having a preterm infant, and now they face that they have a preterm infant and the breast is not ready, so they have to work really strong to try to get these infants to receive their mother's own milk. But it is possible to achieve high breast milk feeding infant rate at discharge. In some regions, 80% of infants. So really, there are differences in different parts of Europe. There are differences depending in social class also. So there are social and economical differences that we have to work out and we have to try to avoid. So the NEO-IAN or the NEO Breastfeeding Health Infant Initiative began providing recommendations in 2012 to improve breastfeeding support with really very good results. So really the survey has helped us to know that the NEO-IAN has already support and improved the results of breastfeeding as discharge in our NICU infants. So let's go to the topic of the talk. So collecting the proposed K-lactation and infant feeding metrics will really help to develop standards of care that supports mother in their lactation journey and improve infant outcome. So the first step in this quality improvement process, and it has been already stated by Muk in the first talk, are limitations of the data used so far. As he has already been explaining very nicely, percentage of infants in neonatal care receiving own mother's milk in the first 72 hours, first 14 days. That is really important, but really we should go further. So in addition to these individual level benefits, the routine collection and analysis of these metrics will allow NICUs to benchmark and improve the quality of service provided. That means developing an institutional culture that prioritizes the use of human milk, like is an essential step. So which data we should collect regarding human milk? So the first thing is we should very much discriminate between own mother's milk, donor human milk, or formula. So as you already know very well, it's not enough to know human milk versus formula. We have to distinguish between own mother's milk, donor human milk, or formula. We should document very importantly the mother's lactation support, videos or pamphlets, and the timing of this. It will be better to give them prior to this to delivery, but sometimes this is not possible. Also, the type of information they have been provided, really what they have been provided, not what the institution would like to provide, but really what the mothers are receiving. And it's very important to work on colostrum, as it has been already stated. So the human milk received during the first 72 hours are crucial. So that is really important data to collect, as it has been already stated. But also I would like to stress something new, that is collection of the amount. So we have already said that the effect is dose dependent. So that means that own mother's milk should be documented in a milliliter per kilogram per day basis, or in a cumulative percentage, how much percentage of the enteral intake is own mother's milk. And there is an inspiring paper published by Bigger as third author, so people from Chicago, in 2014. And they share their experience in how to collect data. So if we go through the paper, we can see that in that particular unit, 98% of the infants included in the study, so 285 from 291, have received own mother's milk. So the percentage of own mother's milk, or the yes or no own mother's milk, is nearly universal. 285 from 291. But when we look at the percentage of infants that are discharged with breastfeeding, we see that only 24.2% of the infants, 69 infants, were receiving exclusive human milk feedings at discharge. So 98% has received sometime, something, but only 24% were discharged at full breastfeeding. 15% were discharged at partial human milk feedings, and 61% were discharged on formula. So the results are really discouraging. So there is a lot for improvement in this unit. We have already stated this is an American unit, and results in European unit are very different one from each other. But what I want to stress is that those infants that were not receiving human milk at discharge received only 18 ml per kilogram per day of own mother's milk, or only 12% of the intake was of enteral intake was own mother's milk. So really, if we are able to collect data on milliliters per kilogram per day or percentage, really it's going to be much more valuable than to know if they have received some own mother's milk during initial hospitalization. So in Spain, we have a national database for infants of very low birth weight at birth. So infants that are born with a birth weight less than 1,500 grams. And we are trying to improve the collection of nutrition of these infants that represents 50% of Spanish infants. And that means that we are willing to collect at 14, 28 days, and 36 weeks post-menstrual age and discharge, just if they are receiving own mother's milk, donor human milk, own mother's milk and donor human milk, own mother's milk and formula, or just formula. So we are working very hard in this direction to try to know that each unit will know, and in a national base, we will know how much or which type of nutrition do infants receive. But as we said already, this is just a small step, because the nicest step will be to know really the amount in milliliters per kilogram per day, or in percentage of intake. So how to manage this? Because when we focus this, I am a clinician, like most of the people that are listening to this webinar, and they said, how can I manage to know milliliters per kilogram per day of all infants in my unit, or percentage? That is a lot of data, a lot of work, and it's true. So I have been astonished by different papers regarding the emergence of mobile technology and in health management. So why do not ask the mothers to record their daily milk pumping frequency and volume data on paper for the first 14 or 28 days of life? And mobile education may be a breastfeeding intervention tool. So do e-technologies have had any effect in improving breastfeeding outcomes among perinatal women? So mothers using the model of online lactation education were able to maintain a sufficient pumping frequency to achieve sustained growth in milk volume, with the majority of mothers achieving milk production over 500 ml per day by day 14. And this is a publication by China, or published in China this year. So they used a mobile phone app. It's called WeChat, and is an instant messaging software for smart terminals. Educators check the mini program daily and contact mothers with daily pumping times less than 6, or a slow milk volume increase through the mini program or by phone to understand the problem and help solve it. So my personal conclusions will be: limitations in using ever received human milk during the NICU hospitalization and human milk feeding and NICU discharge as the only quality indicator for evaluating the use of human milk for very low volume infants in the NICU. The average daily dose in ml per kilogram per day and cumulative percentage as percentage of cumulative enteral intake of on mothers feeding are sufficient to explain the reduced risk of multiple morbidities, including latent sepsis, necrotizing enterocolitis, neurocognitive delay, and rehospitalization in the majority of the very low birth weight infants. These quality indicators that focus on the amount of on mothers milk feedings in the NICU should be incorporated. And nonetheless, we need to target lactation maintenance in this population. Thank you very much for your attention, and I am happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Sanz de Pipon, for this excellent presentation. Now, I would like to invite all of the speakers here, Guido and Dr. Monk too, and the papers, the presentations are open to questions. While the audience is preparing their questions, could I make a question to you, Dr. Monk?
Sure.
You mentioned quality improvement projects from Japan. Do you know that there are any projects in Europe too?
Yes. We have worked together also with a NICU in Portugal and Professor Dr. Rosalina Barroso's group. So Dr. Barroso is heading the NICU at the Professor Dr. Fernandosco Hospital in Portugal. And she was also implementing successfully new lactation care practices. Her focus was on the dose of own mother's milk. So her goal was really to improve that for the most vulnerable infants. And what she actually did with our toolkit was to develop a roadmap to increase the dose of own mother's milk for the NICU infants. and she published her results in summer this year in the Infant Journal. And if you're interested in the link to the publication, you can just drop me an email and I will forward this to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to have the paper.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions or I continue?
We have received some questions in the panel, Professor Sertash.
Yes, now I see. From Tanya Cassidy from Ireland. She is also one of the board of EMBA, one of the board member. She's asking, I was wondering if there are plans to expand the Medela NICU tools to take into consideration cross-cultural comparative research. Thank you, Tanya.
Wow, thank you for this interesting question and also suggestion. We have not yet thought about doing cross-cultural comparative research, simply I think because we're lacking scientists in this field. But of course, we as a global team have shared experiences. Yeah, we have done the QI program in China, in South America, in Europe also. We basically started in India, and we see different themes popping up in China, for example, regarding pumping in front of other people in the NICU and the whole topic of covering while pumping. Yeah, so maybe interesting to look at these aspects also, but we have never investigated that before, to be honest.
Thank you. And the second question from Alexandra Wesolowska. He's from Poland. Guido showed her while she was helping Ukrainian milk banks. She is telling that great presentation, Professor Guido, and hot topic. What should be the order of beneficiaries of milk from the milk bank in case of emergency? How to secure the needs of children outside the hospital? Can we use any decision-making strategy?
Well, of course, this is something that should be realized in advance. So that means that you must have a plan to organize a support. First of all, to include human milk banks organization in a plan, in a program of help support in emergency. So first of all, you have to create a program, a project. After that, you have to utilize you have to organize your country. Because, for example, in Italy, we are working with the Ministry of Health to have a new regulation to include the human milk banks in the emergency plans, emergency health. That means to have a law, and after that, you have to organize all the human milk banks in your country in such a way that you collect, like they are doing in the Philippines, a certain amount of milk that is donated to the bank is utilized. Is conserved, is kept, and is utilized only for this purpose, to support infants and children during emergency. So you need an organization to have a plan for all your country. So we are working on this on this project in Italy. And first of all, you need the support of the Health Ministry of the national law. Secondly, you need money. And to get money, you can probably get some support from private companies, like we are doing, like we are searching now in Italy, because it costs a lot, and the Ministry of Health is giving support with law, but without any money.
Thank you, Guido, for your response. Elke Direk is asking, but she's not indicating to whom she asks. Her question is, do you ever pasteurize mother's own milk? Guido and Miguel, maybe?
Well, we
Okay.
don't.
Yes.
Sorry, Guido, it's your turn.
So, according to me, it's not reasonable to pasteurize all mother milk. There is no need, no necessity. You have to pasteurize only the milk that is donated to human milk banks, because otherwise mother's milk is losing many of its property. So there is no need to pasteurize all mother's milk.
So the only advantage of pasteurizing own mother's milk is to avoid cytomegalovirus infection, and that's the reason in those infants that are really extremely low birth weight or extremely premature infants is not evidence-based, really confirmed. So it has been done in some units in Europe, and in the new guidelines from ESGAN and ESPR regarding enteral feeding of premature infants, is not going to be recommended to pasteurize human milk to avoid cytomegalovirus infection. And it's known that it can be very damaging, even has it has some mortality, but it's so infrequent, and as Professor Guido has already stated, it loses that much benefit for the infant that the position today is not to support as a recommendation the pasteurization of own mother's milk for extremely low birth weight infants. But it can be a matter of debate, or it can be a subject of discussion.
Yes, thank you so much. The participant who asks this question adds, I agree, but Belgian government advises this for ELGAN, extremely low gestational age neonates, for prevention of CMV. Okay, but I know the only study also made, I would like to add, not for CMV, but to decrease the possibility or rate of sepsis, what has been done in COSI has done this study, and it didn't show any difference also in terms of decreasing the sepsis. Guido, please.
Yes, I want to add that if you want, particularly in extremely low birth weight infants, if you want to be safe, completely safe, it is not necessary to pasteurize the milk, but a heat treatment at a low temperature between 50 and 60 degrees for a few minutes is enough. And it gives you the possibility to maintain many of the advantages of mother's milk.
Sure.
Okay, so Otto Stoika is asking how to calculate the need for donor milk in the region. Is it possible to support offers of donor milk outside the hospital through a public initiative? Who will take the question?
Okay.
Sorry, Professor. You know, it's your turn. You are the leader. You are the leader.
Okay, I can tell you the experience that we have in Italy. We have a region, which is Tuscany, that has a regionalized program from human milk banks. There are 6 human milk banks working in this region. They are collecting donor milk, and they are distributing donor milk collected also to other hospitals, to other maternity hospitals, in such a way that all the very low birth weight infants born in this region are able to receive donor human milk. And this is, it is not a private organization. This is a national organization from the local government, from the local regional government.
I would like to stress one point regarding my talk. It would be very important to have the data of your region on mother's milk at discharge in percentage of intake, and that will help to know if really how much you need. So, and that makes also maybe differences between one regions and the others, one mothers and the others, and maybe, and I think it's a disadvantage to have less on mother's milk, based on morbidity and neurodevelopment. So I think we should commit it ourselves to know our own data on mother's milk, due to our infants, due to our patients, to try to provide them with the best nutrition. So that would be my answer to this question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I completely agree with this suggestion that we have to know our own data. And also, I would like to add, yes, maybe a public initiative can be, but donor human milk should be from a well-established human milk bank, not from the the initiatives that we do not know. And this Elke is asking, do you take into account the addition of breast milk fortifier? For which aspect?
Maybe I can take that question. I think this maybe refers to the data collection tool and the infant feeding matrix. So when we collect data on infant feeding, this is of course own mother's milk, donor human milk formula, and there's also a possibility in the data collection tool to see if this infant received a fortifier, in which amounts. So this can be tracked, yes.
Okay. Are there any questions that I don't see? I will.
No, Professor Sertash.
No questions?
No new questions for now.
Okay, I would ask one question for each speaker, then I will conclude the session. I asked already to Dr. Monk, but maybe this is for you, also for Miguel too, Professor Sainz too. What about anxiety of the mothers while you are calculating, measuring the milk amount? Would you do something for that too?
So should I answer first, Miguel?
Sure. You are the expert.
So this is really an interesting question, and that's an objection we really often hear from healthcare professionals. Mothers get afraid when they need to measure their milk volumes, and that exerts pressure. So, and I also would like to challenge your thinking on this, because when other treatment procedures are performed on the babies in the NICU, the mothers and their partners are informed about each step of the treatment. And yet it has been common practice not to discuss the expectations of milk volumes of pumping mothers out of concern for exerting pressure and causing anxiety. But research has clearly shown that mothers' anxiety does not increase when they receive effective and clear breastfeeding counseling and good information how to establish and build up adequate milk volumes for the baby. And the mothers are also really expecting these discussions, because some research even pointed out that mothers were angry and disappointed with healthcare professionals who did not discuss with them how to establish effective milk supply for their baby. So I think this is also, again, the field around informed decision. So if we avoid these discussions, we leave moms in the dark, right? And because moms will simply assume they will have enough. Yeah, and without these discussion, yeah, we really lose this opportunity for mothers to achieve an effective milk supply. So I think no time should be wasted in discussing these topics with moms, my opinion.
Yeah, I would like to stress, I would like to confirm, I have the same idea, and I think support of the mothers, so breastfeeding support is very important. So if we support the mothers from before delivery till the first week or later on even, they are not going to feel stressed. I think they are going to be supported, and they are going to trying to know which is the goal. So another problem is that sometimes they do not know the goal and they do not know how to achieve it. But if they are supported, that so I completely agree with Dr. Muche. Yeah.
I agree to stress this asked question. And Guido, I know that Italian Milk Bank Association has a project also for the use of donor human milk in emergency situations. Could you comment on that? Also, do you know any other projects in the European level?
Well, to my opinion, in Europe there are no plans to include human milk banks in an emergency program. But just to solve this problem, the European Milk Bank Association is organizing a survey with a questionnaire that will be sent to all the responsible of human milk banks in different European countries, just to know what is the present situation and to know if they are planning something for to solve this problem, to include human milk banks organization in an emergency program. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And yes, please.
May I say something? So I think inequalities is one of our main concerns, or should be one of the main concerns in Europe. And that means that I think emergencies is like the extreme of the inequalities. So the image that Professor Guido has shown regarding the earthquakes in Italy, it has been so striking, or the war in Ukraine is so striking, that is like the extreme of inequalities. But unfortunately, we have a lot of inequalities in Europe between countries and between cities or between neighborhoods. So I think we should focus a little bit on this in these inequalities. And these inequalities, the extreme, is what Professor Guido has presented. But I think we have like less marked, but also there are some inequalities that I think we should commit it to work against it. Thank you.
And maybe I also have a comment for Miguel, because you mentioned the topic of hand expression before. And I think hand expression is really useful to get out the sticky drops of colostrum and maybe to improve the time to first colostrum. Absolutely right. But I also have another point on this. In a pump-dependent population, hand expression should not be used alone routinely during this critical window of lactation initiation. It has really its advantages, but it should be used in combination with a pump. And why is this? So there's research, and 2 randomized controlled trials have shown and that hand expression alone is significantly less effective than electric expression in mothers of very preterm infants. This is research by Tina Slasher and Marie Lucier. And therefore, and also according to the study of Jane Morton, moms should be told both the hand techniques and pump expression, because neither pumping nor hand expression perfectly imitates the baby, right? So when the baby drinks milk, it uses both compression and suction. But it's the suction and the vacuum that releases the prolactin, right? And this does all the important things for breast programming and the long-term milk supply, because prolactin, of course, is the milk-making hormone. But don't get me started. This is another topic. And if you wish, I can send you the 2 randomized controlled trials so that you can check. My message is only, please combine both methods in the initiation of lactation phase.
I fully support the comment. So it's true. Maybe No, it's true. Maybe I did not express myself properly, but we're working very hard in our unit to have in the first hours of life some colostrum, and we recommend hand expressing to have the colostrum as soon as possible. But this, I completely agree. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I would just want to be clear at this point, because in Germany, sometimes we see NICUs who only do a hand expression within the first 48 hours. And this is really, not what the evidence says. And I also think the toolkit of the British Association of Perinatal Medicine is really clear about that. So pumping within the first 2 hours after delivery in this vulnerable population, in addition to hand expression.
Thank you. And my last question to Professor Sainz. You already told in the conclusion part, but maybe you would like to underline that which data especially you suggest for data collection for improvement, and also can the parents be helpful in this?
Well, honestly, I feel pushed to improve our data collection, but I also think that we have to be very careful, because if we are very ambitious, maybe we end up with nothing. So I think we should end up with mL per kilogram per day or percentage, at least in some time points. But it's true that I do not know, for example, in a national level, how we are going to be able to manage this, because that's going to be very hard for the doctors or the nurses to collect this data. So maybe cut-off points like 14 days, for example, or 7 days, or 28 days, or discharge. I think earlier than discharge would be better. So yeah, and I think that we should try to involve the parents. So fortunately enough, I work in a unit in which we are family-oriented care. So the parents have a very much role in the care of the infants, and they are playing higher roles. So I think also they can be involved in some type of collection data, and also to help us to intervene. So to have some like data very quick, very early, to know if they are improving quantity of producing breast milk, if not, trying to help them. So I would say try to combine like quantitative data, no qualitative data, at different time points, and try to be help or collaborate with the parents, because maybe in that way we can have some data to compare our units with other units and try to improve our quality of care, and be helped by the parents, maybe can lead us to help them in a proper manner. So I think these both aspects is what I would suggest. But really I have to learn a lot, and I think all of us have to learn a lot, trying to go in a collaborative way and learn from the people that have better results. So that could be my answer.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank our speakers. They really gave us insights to new horizons, and with excellent presentations. And we had a very fruitful questions and answers part. Just I forgot, it is in Portugal, but as far as I understand, Esmeralda Pereira from the Alfredo de Costa Human Milk Bank from Portugal congratulates this initiative, and it's very important, she says, as far as I understand. So I think we can conclude with a few words. This is, you see the European Milk Bank Association board here in after the new elections this year in May. European Milk Bank Association has been founded in 2010. and with the first aim to promote breastfeeding. And only the second aim is to promote donor human milk for preterm infants. In Europe now there are 281 human milk banks and many to open. In the world there are 750 milk banks. And we know that human milk is the most immunopotent nutrient and is vital for preterm infants. Today we have seen in the lectures that it is very important, and its impact on neonatal morbidities in NICU is dose dependent. So, and it's very important to measure and for the quality improvement, and to also to share, or to the parents also could take a part. And from the Dr. Daniela Munk session, we learned that it is very important, the first expression time. It is very important coming to volume. It's very important the first 14 days. Also, Professor Science showed us this. And quality improvement approach we have to have in the NICU to support breastfeeding, and we have to use also evidence-based interventions and measure our outcomes. So breastfeeding at discharge and a volume of breastfeeding that the infant takes in the NICU are also the outcomes, should be considered as outcomes. And Guido, Professor Mora, opened our eyes to the importance of breastfeeding and also donor human milk in the emergency situation. So we are all full with new insights and excited to go on with these perspectives. I also personally gave one of my pediatric residents a thesis on the impact of volume of human milk in the NICU on neonatal morbidities. So I would like to conclude this beautiful webinar, thanking to all valuable speakers, and also to Medela for supporting us and for supporting human milk. Also the participants also, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. I have enjoyed very much. It has been great. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you for this discussion.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Goodbye.